Does this start at 7?
Yes, it will be starting momentarily.
Okay.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. We'll give it a minute while folks continue to join. Welcome, everyone. So clearly, I am not Howie. I am Mary Davis. I know many of you. I've known you for quite a while. So I'm here on the board at Mission Dharma. I also have my own sangha in Richmond, across the bay, in the East Bay. And it's always a privilege, or maybe a daunting privilege, whenever I'm asked to sit in. So, but it's always a pleasure to be with everyone. As we continue to gather, I just want to invite you in just in a maybe just to sort of peer into the other little Zoom boxes, noticing the other human beings. Maybe even sending a little bit of stealth metta. Sally, I love the wave, and Dan's waving. Nice. Yeah, this ability to, that's always been the challenge when we went virtual, is sort of being able to establish that same sense of warmth, that we had, that we're able to get when we're putting all of our bodies together, right? Standing in line waiting for tea. So just unafraid, just to take in the other humans, sending them some well wishes as we continue to let folks gather. Right. Okay, so we can go ahead and get started. As usual, as I mentioned, my name is Mary Davis, and I will be the teacher for this session. Howie will be back next week. And I want to thank Howie Gelman, who is my co-pilot today. Thank you, thank you. Much appreciated. So, all right. And actually, you know what? We've had folks, let's just go ahead and just give it a moment just to maybe open up the mics and say hello to each other. You can say where you're from or how you're doing.
I'm Howard Gelman. I'm from San Francisco. I'm doing well. I'm glad to be back. I've been out of the country, so it would be hard to stream this because it would be like in the middle of the something or other. So I'm jet lagged, but I'm very happy to be joining up again.
Happy you're here.
He's from Berkeley. Um, it's great that it's Tuesday night and we're gathering again. So,
What? Thank you, Keith.
I'm Katie from San Francisco.
Good. See you.
Hello, I'm Daryl from Lafayette. Happy to be here. It's the last several weeks, but I'm happy to be back.
Terrific. Welcome, Daryl. Nancy, you were heading towards your microphone.
And I thought I was muted. I'm Nancy. I'm newly from Petaluma.
Huh.
And it's nice to be with all of you.
Nice to be here.
I'm Mark from San Francisco. It's wonderful to be able to see all your faces. It's not quite as good as being able to feel your presence, but it'll just have to do.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Mark.
This is Sally from San Francisco,
Hi, Sally.
and
Welcome.
I'm new to this group, and already I feel like a friend who's been here
Oh,
times.
lovely. Thank you, Sally. Welcome, welcome.
Hi from Maryland.
Hello, Laura from Maryland.
Good to see you, Mary.
I'm Marjorie from San Francisco.
Nice.
Marjorie.
Hi, Marjorie.
Dan from San Rafael. Mary, it's been too long.
Way too long, Dan.
And Roseanne,
Stephanie from
San
San
Francisco.
Francisco.
Hi, Roseanne. John, were you trying to get in there too?
Yeah, John from San Antonio. I was trying to sneak in there. Hi, everybody. Glad to be here.
Hi, everyone. Who else wants to sneak in here before we dive into silence? Okay. All
David
right.
from Bali.
Where are you? Oh, there you are. Okay. Good to see. Yeah. Good to see you, David, even though I can't see you right now, but you know. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and start heading into silence. So having sort of established our virtual presence here together, right? Who we're sitting with, general geographic information. So just allowing that sense of community, of Sangha to be held. Just knowing that there's this web of connection, this circle of friendship that's holding us even when we start to turn our gaze inward. So allowing the eyes to gently close, or at least a soft downward gaze. Letting go of the appearances of the external world. And that allows us to bring our focus into what's happening here, now, in this body. So allowing yourself to find a posture that feels comfortable, that has a bit of self-care to it, yet where there's also enough uprightness where we can stay alert, particularly for those, I think most of us are at the end of our day here, some of us later than others. So we want ease, yet we want to be able to stay awake. But if you're really tired and you fall asleep, that's fine too. So just this invitation to settle in, making yourself at home in this moment. Allowing yourself to become curious about what you notice. What's happening in this body, in this heart, in this mind. What are we carrying with us from the day? And whatever it is, whether it was a good day or a difficult day or just a neutral day, just letting that settle. Need to replay it. We don't need to analyze it. And just seeing what you notice, what's happening here in the body. What's predominant for you? Often what you first notice may be places that are difficult, that are painful. If that's the case for you, can you meet it with a sense of kindness and compassion? There's tension, if we can soften around it, we do that. Can't we just love it up, is how he likes to say. Just letting those difficult parts know that they belong, that they are cared about and loved. Nothing needs to be left out. Inviting the body to relax, to unfurl, letting the face be at rest. We don't have to look pleasant. We don't have to look nice. Just let the face rest, the jaw release, the shoulders melt. Letting go of all notions of doing, of accomplishing. Let go of our identities, our roles. Allowing ourselves to sink deeply into this moment. Letting each breath be an invitation to a deeper sense of peace. Letting our awareness be infused with kindness, with compassion. Rather than judging our experience, we can be curious about our experience. If we're having one of those evenings when the mind just doesn't want to be quiet, we can be curious about it, not analyzing it or extending the thoughts. Just notice the busy mind is like this. Coming back to the breath, coming back to the body. Just checking in. Where is your mind now? What is the state of your heart? Body? Thing that you need, that you're holding on to in this moment that you can let go of. Sometimes tension sneaks back into the body. The mind falls into its usual preoccupations. Do that, we simply start again. No harm, no foul, no judgment. Moment we can have a fresh start. Noticing if there's any resistance to this idea of simply resting our awareness with the breath. Noticing if the mind is still trying to figure things out, to make things perfect, to judge. If you notice the mind, and again, the act, sometimes just a gentle, not now. We're not rejecting what's happening, just we want to just keep our focus with the breath in this moment. Sometimes just like you would with a disruptive child or pet or friend, just a gentle, not now. Then coming back to just this moment, this body, this breath. We're taking a couple of deeper breaths together. Transition from our sitting period. Letting the body move and stretch as you need. And then when you're ready, bringing your awareness back into the room. All right. So, we're kind of rolling old school today, and we're going to do our announcements between the meditation and the talk. So, Mr. Gelman, if you'd be so kind.
Sure. Um, I have two things I want to announce, and maybe a third. But I want to get the exciting thing is that first foremost is that this Saturday, Howie is going to be hosting a half-day online retreat. And for those of you who have done it, you remember that it's this times, it's not just a number. I mean, it's so much better to have a longer exposure to the Dharma. And this is also great because it doesn't matter where you live, you're all available. It's on Zoom. So it's going to be this Saturday, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. West Coast time. And I put in the chat already the little description and a link, registration link. There's a suggested donation of $20 to $50. By the way, the name of the program is called Spread the Love, and there's never a bad time for something like that, but this is a very excellent time considering the world. So really, you are very invited. Go look at the chat if you happen to be watching this on YouTube and you don't have access to the chat. That information is also in the email that you received today, probably last week too, even though I was in a faraway place. So the other thing I want to say is this is as good as the online thing this Saturday. There's a super duper thing happening at the end of July through the San Francisco Inside Dharma Center, which Howie is a member of, founding member. There's going to be an on-land retreat at Spirit Rock. And that is a 6-night silent retreat, which is monster. I don't know if you guys, I know many of you have. For those who have not and can make it to Northern California, this thing is it's multiplied by a factor of 6, because I think it's 6, because there's all these great local teachers teaching. Howie, John Martin, Anushka Fernandopoul, Eugene Cash, Pamela Weiss, and Victoria Carey will all be teaching there. So there's an opportunity to sit with and listen to all these great people. If you've never been to Spirit Rock, it's gorgeous. The food is great. It's so conducive. The sitting area, I don't know, I call it a temple. I don't know what the really correct word is so beautiful. So do look that up also on the chat. So those are the two main things I wanted to bring up with you tonight. I hope you can attend one or both. And back to you, Mary.
All right. Thank you, Howie. Very much appreciate. So, I was inspired by for our talk today, which if I had to title it, or which I did title it, called The Gift of Asking for Help. I was inspired by a conversation I had with a woman in another community I'm in, and she was debating whether or not to have surgery done either in San Francisco or in the East Bay, closer to her home. And there are definitely advantages to having it done in the city, but she was worried about how she would get there and back, right? With surgery, you can't drive yourself, right? You have to have a friend take you. And I mentioned to her, I said, well, I would be happy to drive you. It would be my honor, a pleasure. And then she just started sort of hemming and hawing, going, oh, I don't want to be a bother. No, I'll figure it out. I can maybe do an Uber, or maybe BART in an Uber in Muni, and just it's just, never mind, I'll figure it out. Right? So does that seem familiar to anyone else? Has anyone else experienced that, either when you've offered help for somebody, or perhaps when you need help yourself and someone offers help to you? That way of just going, no, I'll never mind, I'll figure it out. So it's I know for myself it's kind of a big issue, I've noticed. And when I talk about it with other people, I notice that it tends to resonate. Yeah, someone just said I had the same conversation yesterday, right? I've got other friends who are going through stuff, right? And just whenever I say, well, you can ask for help, or I can help, and it's like, no, we're fine. So I just wanted to sort of take this opportunity to first talk about why we may have this reaction, why we do have this hesitancy for asking for help, and then how we can see this as actually part of our spiritual path. How being willing to ask for help and to accept help is actually totally aligned with our path. So just a warning, I'll be doing, there's a couple lists in this, but these are not Buddha's lists, these are Mary's lists, okay? So this is not coming from the lists are not coming from the suttas, they're coming from just sort of some noodling I was doing on this topic. So as I mentioned, I am more than familiar with the hesitancy or downright inability to ask for help, right? And so when I was thinking about this, I was sort of coming up with a list of what gets in the way. One, and I'll go into each one of these in more detail. So let me just sort of lay out the land here, and then we'll go into more detail. This cultural emphasis on independence, right? I don't know about our Canadian friends, but I know here in the US, we love our independence. We almost fetishize our independence, right? There's a real cultural holding up of honoring, right, this independence. And then what happens from that is that we may take on this identity, this self-identity of being, I am independent, right? I mean, I know that's always been, if somebody asked me like a job or something, it's like, I'm very independent. And I was very proud of that, right? We may have a self-identification as helper, right? We're the ones who offer the help. I'm not the one who needs the help. I'm the one who offers the help, right? And I've heard time and time again, people who have that, who are always so willing to help, but when they need help, it's hard for them to accept. Right? Sometimes what comes up is maybe questions of worthiness. And this one's rather sad, right? We somehow have this feeling that we're not worthy of getting help, of receiving help. We're not worthy of that care, right? And then we may have a fear of being seen as vulnerable, or being seen as a burden or an obligation, right? To be able to feel comfortable enough to show that we're vulnerable, right? Takes some trust, sometimes takes a leap of faith And so sometimes that fear of appearing vulnerable can get in the way. Then finally, in terms of the list, according to Mary, is a fear of rejection, right? Nobody likes to put an ask out there to have it met with, no, right? And so we may turn around and go, I'm not even going to bother because I can't deal with having somebody tell me, to show up as vulnerable and then have somebody, shut me down or just say no. So let's look at each of those a little bit more closely. Oops, hold on for a second. Come on, notes. There we are. So, like I mentioned, so this sense of independence versus interdependence, right? Because in our culture, we honor independence. We have this. It's a virtue to not need anybody. It's a virtue. We think it's like I did it myself, right? To be self-sufficient. To pull oneself up by one's bootstraps is often the expectation. We equate independence with freedom. We have Independence Day. That's all about our freedom. And so, and then I know when I was growing up, it's like I couldn't wait to be independent. My parents couldn't wait till I was independent. Right? I mean, that it was an aspiration. I want to grow up, I want to be independent. And my parents were like, please, right? Because, if an adult is not independent, we assume something's wrong with them. Right? Perhaps if they have a health condition or disability, or maybe it's age related, old age related, we can have some understanding and compassion. But if it's like, a healthy adult and they're dependent, we think, what's wrong with them? We can be rather judgmental and throw around words like lazy, right? So, it's really interesting to look at our sort of our cultural relationship with independence. And I apologize for the dog. And so with this, like I said, we may take this on a nice identity, or perhaps we strongly identify as the helper, right? Perhaps it is a professional role. A lot of people who enjoy helping, who have that personality, they tend to go into roles where that's what they get paid for. That's their profession. Or perhaps it's just a role that you have ended up with in the family, or an expectation the family had that you are the helper, you are the person that holds things together. Or maybe you're just a general do-gooder, right? You sort of, you recognize, you enjoy, right? You enjoy helping people. You know what needs to be done, you know how to do it. You're the person that people turn to in their time of need. You're strong, you're calm. I mean, these are all beautiful qualities. There's absolutely nothing wrong with any of that. But we just need to be aware that there can often be this shadow with this identity with independence, with this identity with being the helper, right? Because then what often happens in this shadow is that there can be this sense of isolation, or perhaps there is, or loneliness, or people think we have it so together that we don't need them, right? They don't reach out. They're like, oh, they're fine. They don't need me. So, and it's something I've noticed, like I said, in myself and in my friends. But it also reminds me of this identification with being, independent. And I'm sure many of you have probably heard Howie refer to, I forget what the story is, or what the source of this is, but that using that feeling of being separate from the rest of humanity, right? And he describes that as like a wave that somehow broke free from the ocean, right? When we're feeling disconnected, when we're feeling isolated, when we're feeling misunderstood, not seen, right? And we have some idea that everybody else has their stuff together, right? Everybody else is surrounded by loving family and friends, and they don't have any bad habits or addictions, right? So this sense of being disconnected, right? We end up feeling different, like we don't belong. So that's sort of the shadow side of that independence, of that being helpful, is that it's that we can end up feeling separate and isolated because the connection we want is only one way. And so another reason that we may not ask for help is this we have some belief that we're not worthy of receiving help. You know, there are these inner voices that may be telling us that we're not worthy, and those voices can be pretty compelling sometimes. They can be pretty convincing. But our task is not to believe them, right? To understand that we are just as worthy of kindness and care. We're just as worthy of metta, right? On all these teachings about metta, it's about expanding this circle of care to include ourselves too. That's probably the hardest part, right? And recognizing that you're an important part of the whole, right? That we all depend on each other. So there's an analogy that is often used when we're talking about this interconnection, interdependence. And the analogy is that of a web. And so Alan Watts wrote, imagine a multi-dimensional spider's web in the early morning covered with dewdrops. And every dewdrop contains the reflection of all the other dewdrops. And each reflected dewdrop, the reflection of all the other dewdrops in that reflection. And so ad infinitum. This is the Buddhist concept of the universe in an image. And then Jack Kornfield said, you are part of the web of life. You don't need to hold on so tightly. Right? So they're sort of pointing at different things, but it's still, for me, this image of a web is really powerful, right? Because when you think about a web, right, there's a sense that it's so delicate and it's so beautiful, yet it's also incredibly strong, right? If you ever tried to take down a spider's web and you're just like, come on, get out, right? They can be very strong. And they're home, right? They're a spider's home. And so, and then plus it's just everything's connected. If you touch one part of the web, the whole web reverberates, right? And so we're not these separate things. We're all connected via this web. So another reason why we may not want to ask for help is this fear of being seen as vulnerable or being viewed as a burden or an obligation. I remember not so long ago when my best friend was dying and I was trying to organize some caretaking relief for her husband while also giving her friends an opportunity to be with her because they just so wanted to see her and express their love and their care, right? But it was so frustrating because she was so used to being the mama bear in her community. She was the one who took care of everything, right? She was the one who, when there was a problem, you went to see her. And so this idea of being seen in such a fragile state was just too much for her to bear. It was too much for her pride to be with. Or she felt like she was going to be seen as an obligation or pitied, right? Or people would be horrified by her appearance, And I kept trying to reassure her, right? It's like, no, people just want to love on you. People would just want to tell you how much you mean to them. But it was just like, no. And she and her husband ended up doing it all themselves. And it was a bit of a mess. But, I get it. Being vulnerable is scary, especially when you're stepping out of a role, being a helper, and it's a huge shift. Plus if you've been healthy all your life, right? It's easy to lose touch with, what are the five remembrances, right? These 5 truths, I am of the nature to grow old, cannot escape old age. I am the nature to grow ill, cannot escape illness. I am of the nature to die, I cannot escape death. I will be separated from everything and everyone I hold dear, and my only true possession is my actions. Right? So as we go about our life, and particularly if we have a relatively easy life and we've been healthy, it's really easy to lose touch with these things. And then suddenly you're confronted with old age, sickness, and impending death. It's hard to sort of make that shift. So finally, finally on my list is the fear of rejection. Right? Nobody likes to be told no. But it happens all the time. And what's interesting is that most of the time, it really has nothing to do with you, right? It has to do with their schedule, or it has to do with their own sense of capacity, or most of the time it doesn't have that much to do with you. Yet it's so easy to read into that no. Then it becomes some sort of story about feeling unloved, or we collapse into that sense of unworthiness, or we maybe end up thinking, or we may, remember that this person, we've done favors for this person. Well, why won't they do this for this? And then we fall into to anger and resentment. So then with all these possibilities, unpleasant possibilities, we may go, why bother? It's a hassle asking for help. I'll figure it out myself. Okay. So those are the reasons, I came up with. I'm sure there are more. I'm sure that we all have our own reasons, or have heard reasons that people are hesitant to ask for help. But I also wanted I also want to remember those times when I've offered help and it's been thwarted by my friends who, are resistant to it, accept help. And it's like, it doesn't feel good, right? And so I want to be more willing, more open myself to accepting help. So I started to think about how this aligns, how we can bring the practice to bear to some place of resistance. What teachings can I remember that will open me to that? So of course, I made a list. The first part of this is remembering our interdependence, right? Because when we look at our path, when we look at the teachings, it's very relational, it's very interdependent. Sometimes we may have this notion, particularly when we're sitting in silence and our eyes are closed, it feels very individualistic. But if we look at the teachings, right? We look at the teachings on Sila, we look at the Brahma Viharas, we look at some of the paramis, we look at all of these things. It's about building these relationships. It's about how we are with each other, and we need each other for this practice. We can't do this alone, right? And that's not just needing each other when we're at our best. We need each other when we're at our worst, or we especially need each other when we're at our worst. So part about independent, and again, I'll go into a little bit more detail about each of these. So remembering interdependence, remembering our connection, remembering the relational parts of the path. The other thing is to remember that when we're offering others the opportunity to be generous, right? It's like, when we have all these teachings about generosity. And so when we need help, we're actually offering people the opportunity to be generous, and all the benefits that come with that. And in that, sort of the other side of that is this opportunity to practice gratitude, right? When people are helping us, it's very natural for there to be this sense to relax into this sense of gratitude and appreciation. love. It's also a way that we can cultivate self-compassion, right? So that we're able to hold our suffering in a way that's like, what do I need in this moment? How can I take care of this suffering? So it's a way to turn towards it in a way that is kind and caring. And then finally, this, we're cultivating wisdom, right? Being with things as they are. I think sometimes when we're hesitant to ask for help, we may be holding on to some old image of ourselves or holding on to some other notion. But the truth of the matter is, I'm aging. I don't do things as well as I can. I need assistance now. This is how things are in this moment at this time, right? So it's this way of just dropping out of the stories and dropping into how things are. So let me, again, going into a little bit of more detail. So talking about interdependence, right? And sort of deepening our understanding of that. Because everything we are and everything we have has come from others, with the help of others, right? Even our bodies that we identify so clearly, this is my body, right? When you look at it, right, what is this body made of, right? I mean, it was formed from the DNA from our parents. It's kept alive by food that is provided for us. It's kept healthy by medical professionals. So there's all of these things that even with just this body that we can so closely go, this is mine. When we start to sort of look deeper, we realize even this body is, comes from others, is nurtured by others, is fed by others. I one time sort of did I was thinking about the time when I had DoorDash, and it's like, okay, I got my DoorDash, I got my pad thai, but then when I thought about it, it's like, okay, my ability to have this pad thai, and it's quite tasty, this restaurant near my house, but it's like, it not only involves the driver, it involves people, the workers at the restaurant, it involves the people who grow the food, who pick the food, who package the food, people who work on the roads, that make the cars, I mean, the transportation, right? I mean, all of this goes into this simple ability for me to have some tasty pad thai, right? And unless we're getting everything from our own garden, but even then we have conditions, right? We have the soil and we have water and we have the sun, right? Most of us, I mean, there's just unknown number of hands that have been involved in our ability to eat, to nourish ourselves. And so when we think about that, right, my well-being is intricately connected with their well-being, right? And sometimes I think that we can, oops, sorry, just lost my place here. Sometimes we may think that, I think especially in this culture, pay for service, we just think, well, I deserve this because I paid for it, right? And we see everything as a financial transaction, right? I'm very separate because I paid for this, right? I don't need to worry about anybody else. I paid for this with my own money. But again, we're not, conventionally that's true. Yes, I paid for somebody to bring me some pad thai. But when we start looking deeper, and it's because the sense of like, if it's just a financial transaction, there's this sense of entitlement, right? But if we drop into the whole connection, then all these other beautiful qualities can come up. So when we practice like this and we start to expand our view to recognize, how interconnected we are with all others with all of life, right? Then we can start recognizing how it starts to sort of chip away at that barrier between us and others. The same with the Brahma Viharas, right? When we do the Brahma Viharas, the metta and the compassion, the mudita and the equanimity, right? We keep on expanding this circle of care, right, to those that we don't even know, right? And so slowly, again, that us and others is being chipped away. So we start relating through our interdependence rather than as our dependence. I need you and you need me. It's as simple as that. Sometimes we're the ones who need help, and sometimes we're the ones who can offer help. So there's a great quote by Albert Einstein that talks about this interconnection, which I just love. He says, a human being is part of a whole called by us universe. It's part limited in time and space. He experiences self as thoughts and feeling as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest to us. Our task is to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. Right? So even Einstein, and I really apologize for that. Hold on. So then the other thing that other part of practice that we can bring into this is generosity. Is to remembering generosity, right? We talk about generosity every single week, right? When we talk about Dana. And part of that's like generosity was the first teaching that Buddha would give when people would come to him, right? To learn. He wouldn't teach them meditation. He wouldn't teach them mindfulness or metta. He taught them generosity, right? Because we're familiar with it. We know how it feels to be generous. We know what it feels like to give. We know what it feels like to receive, right? And that also is chipping away at the sense of us versus others, right? And then plus, if we recognize for ourselves, I mean, it's great to understand it intellectually that, oh yeah, giving is good, right? But we want to be able to experience that for ourselves, to really feel into the goodness of giving, right? And so if we can feel the joy of giving for ourselves, you know, why would we want to deny that to anyone else, right? So there's a friend of mine, a dear one, I'll just call him a dear one, is someone who just naturally understands giving. He's just this natural person who gives. And in his corner of town, if anybody needs something done, they call him. You got your toilet exploded, call Ted. There's a hole in your deck, call Ted. Your car needs jumping, etc. Right? Need a ride to the pharmacy, he's there. And you know, he had this one neighbor who had all of these physical and mental health issues. And he was a mess. And I remember one time I was talking to him and he was telling me what he was doing that day. He goes, "Oh, I get to help Richard replace his hot water heater." And I'm like, "You get?" You know, usually I think of something like that as, you know, for something that may be fun. You get to dog seat, you get to feed their chickens, you get to do something like that. You know, house sit and they have a really nice house. But he's like, "No, I get to." And he just said, you know, and I asked him, I said, you know, what? And he goes, "I just really like helping. I really like the way it makes me feel. I like the fact that I can help him, you know, do things that he wouldn't be able to do. Or I save somebody money because I went in and helped them and they didn't have to hire somebody." And so it was such a great reframing, this idea that he gets to help rather than he has to help. which I think sometimes is the way that even all, sort of like, oh yeah, I have to help somebody, do some stuff, right? So, he just feels good about it. He really appreciates, and so he's seeing that joy that comes from giving. And then on the other side of that is gratitude, right? So if we are offering others the opportunity to be generous, we are also opening our hearts to feeling grateful, right? Obviously, you don't want to feel entitled. We want to feel grateful. I remember last summer when I had COVID and I wasn't feeling great because I had COVID, right? But I figured I could write it out on my own between DoorDash and Instacart. I can get food, I can get, supplies and things like that, but I needed to pick up a prescription, right? Normally I do it by mail, but they wouldn't mail this prescription because it was time bound. And I remember just the hesitancy and I tried everything except for, asking for help. I was going to get a courier. I don't know what I was going to do, but finally, I just said, you know what, I'm going to break this pattern. I'm going to ask my friends, right? So I sent in a text and it was responded to very quickly. And this wave of gratitude just washed over me. Rather than focusing on how icky I felt because I had COVID or how scared I was to be seen as needing something, it was like, oh my gosh, I was able to sort of melt into this pool of gratitude. And I felt so loved and cared for. And so if I had not asked for help, I would not have been able to experience that. And so also then another thing that we can practice in terms of our practice is self-compassion, right? So when we refuse to ask for help when we need it, we're not being very kind to ourselves. We're not being very compassionate with ourselves because we're denying ourselves the care that we need. And maybe we do this, we convince ourselves we're fine, we don't need the help, I'll be okay, right? So what we end up doing is that we're denying our suffering, right? We're turning away from it. It's like, no, I'm fine, no big deal. It's nothing, it's just a little, right, pain or whatever's going on. And so if we're denying our suffering, we're not being with things as they are. But it's like, how can we meet it with tenderness? How can we open our heart to ourselves when we're going through a hard time, right? If we deny our suffering by going, it's fine, it's not a big deal, I don't need anything. So how do we, challenge those voices that believe that we shouldn't be suffering or that our suffering in the big picture doesn't matter? That's a big one, right? Oh, there's a lot of people suffering more than I am. Or some belief that there's something wrong with us because we need help. Or maybe if we worked harder, right, we wouldn't need help. We have all sorts of crazy messages going through our head. Some that have been there since childhood, some that are planted by our culture, some that we picked up Lord knows where. But we want to be able to challenge those voices and be able to meet ourselves where we actually are. We don't want to have to fake it. And so, when we practice self-compassion, we open to our own suffering. We recognize that it's here, that it's, it's hard growing old. It's hard being sick. It's hard living alone. It's hard, whatever the situation is. And just acknowledging it and just holding ourselves with a lot of tenderness. And then also recognizing that it's bigger than us too, right? Everybody else has also probably had to deal with some of this stuff. Maybe not our exact suffering, maybe it may be different. And then after that, then we's like, what do I need? What do I need in this moment? Can I speak kindly to myself? Can I What can I offer myself to help alleviate some of my suffering? And sometimes it's, with wise discernment, it's asking for some help. And then finally, in our last couple minutes here, is the other thing is that we, this developing of wisdom, right? So anytime we drop out of the story of ourselves and we drop into our direct experience, we're cultivating wisdom, right? We're with things just as they are, right? And so with that clarity, we're able to discern what is needed. What is needed in this moment as it is, not how I wish it were, not how it used to be. What is needed in this moment? And so if there's things that are happening, it's like we may be able to discern, is this something I can and should handle on my own, or do I need help? Right? What is the wise response? So those were just some thoughts I had about asking for help. And like I said, it was infused with Dharma, but it was not a Dharma list. So I maybe have time for like 1 or 2 questions. If you have any questions or comments, I would love to hear them. Oops. And now I have a screaming cat. It's a zoo here. So did that make sense to folks? I hope that resonated. Thank you. Yeah, Nancy.
I can just say that it resonated with me. I certainly have had difficulty at times asking for help, and as I've aged, I'm getting better at it. But
Yeah.
I'm a work in progress with it.
We all are. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Nancy. Yeah, the aging thing, it starts coming up more and more, doesn't it? There's some of us here who can relate to that. Others, it's coming. All right. Well, we are at time, so let's just take a moment before we close to appreciate our showing up for ourselves, showing up for each other. Knowing that we take all the goodness that we've gathered here and we can spread it far and wide to those known and unknown, those near and far, those that are dear and those that are difficult, human and non-human. May all living beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all living beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. And may all living beings live in peace. All right, my friends, do feel free to unmute and say farewell to each other.
Thanks, Mary.
You're welcome.
Fun.
Good night, everybody.
Yes.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks,
Night,
Mary.
everybody.
Good night.
Thank you,
Thanks, Mary.
Mary.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Take
Very
care.
much. Good night.
Yes.
Thanks, Mary. Beautiful to be with you.
Oh, lovely to be with you too, David. You are missed. All right, my friends. I'm logging off.
Bye.
Bye. Bye,
Bye.
Howie. Thank you so much for your help.
Of course. Thank
Of
you.
course. All right. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Mark.